Welcome everybody to Letter Now, a podcast where we nurture the hand lettering masters of tomorrow, today. My name is Martina Flor. I'm a lettering artist, author, and educator, and today we're going to talk about finding your passion and your personal brand or voice as an artist. We will speak about how to find your passion, if this is actually something you find or is like something that is hidden somewhere. We will touch on how to stand out in the crowd with your work, and we will talk about developing your unique profile as an artist and attracting the opportunities and the clients you want to attract. And for this, I have a great lettering master here with me, Ivan Castro. Ivan is from Spain. He's a graphic designer that specializes in lettering, calligraphy, and typography. He's also the author of the bestseller ABC to Custom Lettering. So, hello, Ivan. Thank you for being here on the podcast today. Did I miss something in the presentation? How will you introduce yourself?
Yeah.
So how will you define yourself and your work? How will you present yourself?
Yeah, well, I come from a graphic design environment. So I studied graphic design, used to work in graphic design studios. But at some point, I decided that I wanted to focus on handmade letter forms. Parallel to studying graphic design, I had a background on calligraphy. So I wanted to focus on calligraphy, and later it came lettering as well, and some type design. So yeah, basically what I do is calligraphy, lettering, type design, everything under a graphic design point of view, because it's what I used to do. So it's for me, graphic design. I work as a graphic designer regarding the process.
Great. So I invited you to discuss today's topic because I feel you have clearly a focus on lettering and calligraphy. You're a graphic designer, as you said, but you have a focus on creating letter forms with different techniques. And you seem to have found your passion there or your interest there. But your work, I feel, is so distinct, and so, it stands out in the crowd. And, I feel that also the way you look, like the things you like, the music you listen to, and your work are like perfectly synchronized. And I will add a link to Ivan's website and Instagram account, so that you can, if you don't know his work, I will add that to the show notes. So if you don't know his work, you will know exactly what I'm talking about when you see his work. When I see Ivan, I can totally understand the kind of work he does. And I think this is a very good example of an artistic expression, or when we speak about like finding your voice or your personal brand as an artist, I think that you represent that perfectly, And I would like to before we start with the listeners' questions, that this is like a listener-driven show, and we answer to questions from listeners. But before we get into that, I would like to ask you, like, how do you see this? You also find a connection between your interests and your work. How do you bring that together?
It's interesting that you say that, because I claim not to have a particular style, because I tend to run from this. Because I want my work to be as versatile as possible. So that's why I work always under different techniques and strategies. So sometimes I work with more calligraphic tools. Sometimes I work in digital. Sometimes at some point in between. And I like to work with classic letter forms, also with some more modern letter forms, taking inspiration from very different places. But I guess that it's the way I work that links everything together, and not the final result. So yeah, I know what you say, that when you have an overview of my work, there is something in common, even though it's a Roman capitals or it's some monster type from the 60s. And it's also true that my personal interests sometimes show up. But that's you cannot avoid that, because if you are, for example, into punk rock and you like punk rock, eventually it will come a punk rock band and will ask you to design the cover of a record or a logotype. So that's the point when your personal interests, your inputs mix with your professional life. So it's not something I have pursued. It's more something that just happened and in a very natural way. So I think this is the way you get your personal style. You are not looking for it. It's just that you have it, and it's that it's that tacky sentence that you have to be yourself. Well, it's true. You have actually to. You don't have to make up a character. It's you just have to let go what you have inside. It can work, or eventually it will work. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I totally see what you are speaking about. I can see in your work that you can approach many different styles and many different letter forms, and I think I can resonate with that because we are both graphic designers, and perhaps we have a similar way of approaching projects that is like very problem solving and not so from an artistic side of point of view, right? So you're more there to, to bring a solution to the problem, and therefore, it's not about your style, but it's about the style that is required for that project, right? So, but I can totally relate to that idea of like, despite trying to to approach different styles, people tell you that they can see a very distinct style in you, or that when they see something, it's very Ivan, or it's, do you get these moments? Yeah. So I think there's something that definitely comes out in what we do, like something personal or our way of doing stuff that definitely comes out. But I think it's so clever or so freeing the way you put it, that you say like, it's not something you should, put pressure on and kind of pursue to find it. It's something that actually comes out naturally, right? And like the more you do, the more you are in that work or in the work you do, right?
Yeah. There's also some feedback with what you have done. It resonates, and when you will do, it's an evolution. Being totally rupturistic with your work, I think that's not possible. And if you do that, maybe you're putting yourself in some sort of uncomfortable position. There is another cliche, and it's that about getting out of your comfort zone. It's like, fuck you, I don't want to get out of my comfort zone. I'm really, really fine here. I can look outside, I can buy something and get it into my comfort zone. But I don't know if there's too much pressure with that. It's like, it works, so I can move in certain radio, but it's not that you have to get yourself out of your comfort zone always. I mean, do your best where you are, and it will go good. Yeah.
Also, I think that that we work, or some of us work so hard to get to that comfort zone, and then you have to get out of that comfort zone, right? So I mean, and it could be a decision, like it could be, it could be a trigger of a lot of things, like to move out of your comfort zone, and that's totally acceptable, but it doesn't need to be that way,
that way. No.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. So let's get into some of the listener questions. We will start by answering voice messages. You can send us your voice memos with questions and comments by simply going to martinaflor.com/voice message, or email your recording to podcast@martinaflor.com. So let's listen to the first voice message from Eric in Vienna.
Hi, I was wondering, how did you get to become a lettering artist professionally? How did you find out that your passion is something that you could do for a living? Because I have a lot of interest in a lot of things that I'm doing, and I'm struggling to find out which one to pursue and become professional in, or maybe even make a living of that. Thank you so much for listening, and looking forward to hear from you.
So there's two things in Eric's question. I think one of them is how to find your passion, which is I think it's a pursuit that many have. Like, what am I passionate about, and how can I find that, right? And the other one is whether you need to make a living with your passion or not, right? Because you could have a passion and not necessarily make a living of that, right? Like make a living with something else. So, and this is also like, finding your passion is also a thing of our times. It's similar to this, like, leave your comfort zone. There's this other quote, which is like, find your passion. And personally, I feel that passion is not something you find, like it's hidden somewhere, Passion is something you develop through making and through getting to know something deeply. Or this is actually what happened to me, right? Or from my perspective, this is the way I developed a certain passion for my craft, right? By doing that repeatedly, by putting a lot of work. And I say this because I feel that many of you listening might be waiting to find it. You might be very frustrated because you're not finding that passion that will like lead you through your life. And you're waiting for that sign where you're suddenly experimenting. If you're experimenting with different things, you're waiting for that sign where you are like suddenly saying like, oh, I found my passion. And I think this is a total illusion, right? You might find, I think what could happen is that you might find yourself fascinated by something, or you are experimenting with, illustration, or you're experimenting with lettering, and then you find yourself like fascinated by that. And then if you really pursue that for a while and you get to know that craft, you might develop a passion, right? But the passion is not something that you have up front. It's something that comes like, after a while, right? And there's a book that speaks about this topic that I will give you the name of this book later in one of our segments, which is called Better Now. But I think this definitely speaks about that idea of finding your passion, or that myth of finding your passion. But from my experience, Ivan, I'm passionate about lettering because I put so much work in it. And like, I feel that now with lettering, I get to see letter forms at a level that I couldn't do before. Like, I couldn't do when I started 10 years ago. And this is what also fascinates me about the world of lettering, that I understand it and I can see the minimal variations that it has. And this is what what lightens me up, right? And what are your thoughts? How did your passion for lettering started, and what is your take on this idea of like find your passion and developing a passion?
In my case, the passion for letter forms, it popped up really early. I learned to read really, really young, like age 3 or something, reading signs on the street. And my mom couldn't believe it, and I could read signs on the street, and that was the beginning, because I was really appealed, really attracted by that signs. And I used to read comic books and paid more attention to the headlines or to the lettering of the comic books than at the illustration itself. Time warp to when I started to study graphic design. I started to study product design and not graphic design at the very beginning. But at the same school, there were graphic design students that had a class on calligraphy, and I somehow managed to get their handouts and practice calligraphy at home without even attending the class. And that was because I needed to do that. What I want to say is that it's really innate of me to be attracted for letter forms. I have another passions, like music, like photography, but this one is the one I'm kind of good at. So I have focused my professional life on this. But as I say, it's something that I was very aware of it since I was a child. If you're in your 30s and you're still looking for your passion, it's because you don't have a very specific one. I mean, I don't want to be mean or rude, but you don't have to find your passion. You have already found it if you have one. It's like your style. You don't have to find your style. You already have one. Just have to unearth it a bit, or believe on it. Maybe you're passionate about, I don't know, harvesting artichokes, for example, and you find this couldn't be it's like, come on, harvesting artichokes, is that a passion? I want to be an illustrator. Yeah, but maybe what you have to do is harvesting artichokes, and you're the shit doing that. And set that free, set that feeling free. I'm very passionate about photography, always carrying a camera in my pocket. But I know I am not very good. I'm a terrible photographer, but that doesn't stop me of taking photos on the street. But what I'm good at, I'm going all for this. So yeah, on one side, your passion is something you already have. It's like you say, it's hidden somewhere and you have to find it. Maybe it's right after your nose, and you have to see it and you're not paying attention enough. On the other side, can your passion be your profession? Can you make a living out of your passion? Maybe you can, if you're good enough, and if you work hard enough to make a living out of it, or if your passion is something that can actually be a job, because sometimes passions are meant to be a hobby, and that's it, and it's fine. I think it's a bit overrated, that thing of, hey, I want to make a living out of my passion. Maybe, I mean, the world needs people that works in every single thing. Before becoming a letter artist, I have worked in a lot of things that I don't want to do again, but I'm very proud of, and that's fine. And you can work at a supermarket and go home and do illustration, and that will be fine. Sometimes you get some freelance job. Sometimes that freelance job will keep you busy all the weekend. And sometimes you could quit your daytime job and be brave enough to be a professional illustrator. But I don't think this is something you have to pursue, because it can be very frustrating if you don't get it immediately, because we are used to very immediate results right now, and things doesn't work that way usually. So yeah, don't get too frustrated, and don't put too much pressure on you with that passion becoming a living thing, because it's not always that way.
Yeah, there's so many things to unpack from what you said. Like, one of the things is like, do you really need to put that pressure on a passion so that you can make a living of it? Can you just enjoy that passion and just do it on your free time, or like allocate a piece of your day to pursue that passion? But I think that's so freeing as well as a line of thought, to think that, hey, you don't need to make a living out of your passion. So that's one of the things. The other thing that I think is so interesting from what you said is like, perhaps it is about finding your passion, but perhaps the passion is already there. You need to just look at the things you're doing and try to identify what are the things that you're doing or you have been doing throughout the years that is consistent and you have developed a skill with, and kind of double down on that, right? Because I feel that we hear these stories about like people who pivoted careers, and actually one of the episodes that I from the podcast where I think the last one was with Belinda Ku. She's also like a lettering artist, and she was a biotechnology something in a totally different area or discipline, and she pivoted careers, right? And she is now like a successful lettering artist, right? But I feel that her example is like very unique. You know, it doesn't happen that often that you suddenly pivot careers and you like thrive in that. Actually, perhaps a more clever way will be to find out the things you have been doing since you're a child, like you, for instance, and try to like really go deep into that. Like try to look in yourself, what are your interests? And maybe if you put work and you dedicate yourself to that, you will develop a passion for that, right?
And the goal of making a living out of it, you have to consider that should be very, very far away. Sometimes I get messages on Instagram from people that, hey, I just discovered that I want to be a professional letter artist, that I have discovered my passion. And you have a look at their profile and it looks very amateurish. And it's because they have been doing calligraphy for 6 months. And it's like, have you been doing calligraphy for 6 months and you already are thinking about becoming a professional calligrapher? You won't enjoy it that way. I mean, you have to do calligraphy because you love it, or lettering, or illustration, or photography, or whatever. Just enjoy the learning process. Eventually, at some point, if you're lucky and professional enough, you will make it. But it doesn't have to be a goal on its way. Being a professional letter artist, you have to do lettering because you love it. And good luck with it. I always say that for me, lettering is not a hobby because it's my job. But I understand that for many people, it can be a hobby, as the same way I do photography as a hobby. And a photographer maybe will raise his brow looking at what I do, but I don't really care because I do it for fun. So that's what you have to pursue at that point, to have fun, and let's see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think that will make like an entire new podcast speaking about, like, you know, how important it is to develop your skills first before you think of making a living out of that. So Eric, to answer to your question, what I can tell you, or what we can like extract from the conversation right now, is that if you're looking for your passion, start first by looking at the things you are already doing, and you know, this way you will find out what your interests are, and you know what you have already developed skills with, because you have been doing that for a while, or you have been experiencing that for a while, and you have developed skills on that for a reason as well, you know. So perhaps doubling that on this skill, or kind of going deeper into that, will help you find your passion. That sort of sums up in the idea of like, yeah, perhaps it's about finding your passion or finding that interest within you, and then putting the work so that that becomes a passion of yours. If that makes sense? I hope so. So let's go on to the let's move on to the second voice message from Laura.
Hi, my name is Laura. I am loving this podcast. Thank you so much for creating this space. I have a question for Ivan. I wanted to know, what is a good way to stand out with your work? I mean, there are so many lettering designers out there, and finding a unique style is not easy. So how did you deal with this?
So much to unpack from these questions. First, the idea that you need to have a style that we were touching on before, that I think also it will make an extra podcast, you know, just to speak about style and whether you need a style or not, or how to find a style. So yeah, that will make a different podcast. But the other thing here is the perception that there's a lot of lettering artists out there, and that it's hard to stand out. Yeah. And it's funny, Ivan, because I recently sent an email to my private email list about this, and the subject of the email was, the lettering market is oversaturated. And the opening rates of this specific email were over the roof, were nothing like my other emails. And they have good opening rates. But this was like everyone opened this email. So I believe this question that Laura had might resonate with a lot of the listeners. So thank you, Laura, for asking that. But I feel that you, Ivan, you definitely stand out with your work. You know, this thing that I was saying in the beginning, that there is, you know, everything in you is synchronized or feels synchronized, like your interest, the way you look, the way you speak, the culture in your background, the work you do. So everything is sort of synchronized. So what do you think makes you stand out in the crowd, and what would you say to Laura so that she can do the same?
Yeah, I think that part of the thing is that, I mean, I have been doing calligraphy for more than 20 years. So that means that I started to get a really strong interest of it before social media existed and lettering was a thing. So that means that when all this exploded, let's say 10 years ago, I already had some sort of criteria at the time of developing a project or selecting reference. Or the thing is, what I would say, as long story short, is that you should look outside social media, because there is some sort of endogamic feeling that if I follow certain letter artists, is because I love what they do, and it's completely unconscious. But if I follow a series of letter artists, it's because I love what they do, and when I start to do my own projects, somehow it will look the same they do. And at some point, someone will follow you and will do the same. And everything looks a bit the same nowadays. So the thing is, since I started to develop a taste for letter forms before all this exploded, and I tend to look for reference outside social media, like old advertisings, old magazines, old movie posters. All that tends to look outside the box, to think outside the box. Sorry. I think that at the end, what I do is not just looking another kind of reference to stand out. It's because I look at the things I love. Again, hearing at your body, it's important. And trying to... I'm trying to put in words all that feeling. You have to trust more your guts. You have to trust your feelings, what you like, and not try to look like the girl next door, because you have to run from that endogamic feeling I'm talking about. Again, I sometimes tend to talk in a kind of I don't want to be despotic. I don't want to sound like everything is bullshit. No, everything is fine. It's just if you ask me what I do, is just that I tend to look for reference in other places rather than, the bread and butter of your Instagram daily feed.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's a good advice for Laura and also for everyone listening, like that. Living, looking outside the box we can call which is, actually manifested in Instagram. Looking outside the box of Instagram will not only give you like new sources of inspiration, which will allow you to develop a more personal style, if that's what you're looking, so that you stop looking at what others do, and then that influences the work you create. But also leaving the box will sort of liberate you from this this perception that, there's a lot of lettering artists out there, because what Ivan, you were saying right now is that, of course, we follow lettering artists. Like my feed is full of lettering artists and type designers. So my perception of the world is that little box of Instagram where I feel that everyone is doing what I'm doing, right? But there's a much bigger world outside in which you can thrive and you can be unique, right? So I think that's a good advice in those two aspects for you, Laura, and for everyone listening, that leaving that box will help you first develop a more unique style, but also will sort of clean away or wash away this perception of that the market is oversaturated, because that is not true. It's just that you are looking only at those that are doing what you're doing right now, whether that is lettering or illustration or calligraphy, right?
I want to explain an anecdote that can illustrate very good what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Martina, you remember last time we met, and that was in Berlin Letters a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
We were at that dinner party.
So that's a conference here in Berlin, just for those that don't know.
Yeah, and it was a conference that we both attended as speakers, and we were at a dinner party with other speakers. And the day next, I had some free time in the morning, and we were talking with Sol Matas as well. And it was like, and what are you doing tomorrow? Are you going to the Bookstaben Museum? And I was like, nope, I will go to the Ramones Museum. And it was like, there is a Ramones Museum in Berlin. And I was like, yeah, there is a Ramones Museum, and it's in Kreuzberg. And instead of going to the Buchstaben Museum, that was the obvious choice when you're in Berlin and you love letters, I went to the Ramones Museum, and it was full of posters and records and all kind of ephemera about that specific punk rock band. So that's what I'm talking about. That's what thinking outside the box means. It's like you can get inspiration that it will go to your work in any place. So yeah.
And look how interesting, because that thing you were going to visit actually is really connected with your own interests. So the more you pursue your own interests, the more that will show up in your work. So everything connects. And I think, Laura, I think these are really good insights for you. Laura, I want to invite you to sign up for my Lettering Tips newsletters, because, there's thousands of people who signed up for my private newsletter, and they basically sign up because they want to receive free lettering tips, which they do. But they get a lot more than that. They get inspiration and reflections like, this one that we just discussed with Ivan. So if you're having these sort of questions, you will totally benefit from this newsletter, and the content I deliver there is totally free. You can sign up on martinaflor.com/lettering tips. So thank you, Laura and Eric, for sending those questions. We are moving on to our next section. And I think in this section, we're going to answer just one of the questions. I have two questions today, but I don't want to go over time. This section, or this segment of our show, is called Inspirational Quote Time. We all love quotes, like lettering artists love to illustrate quotes. And in this section, we do our best to answer questions from our listeners on social media with a quote. So that's a little bit of a challenge, Ivan. We later put these quotes or maxims on our show notes so that listeners can letter them or they can share them on social media. Ivan, no pressure here. The truth is that we will ramble around to try to find an answer and try to put together a quote. If we do it, then great. If not, then don't worry. We will put something together later on, and we will make you sound great.
So right now it's Friday afternoon while we record this. So yeah, don't be too excited. Yeah.
Okay, good. So here's the first question from Gaito Color. This is like the Instagram handle. So how do you continue doing the same work, for so many years? I'm having too many good ideas, and it's hard to stick to just one idea and give myself time. So interesting. I feel this is like the syndrome of our time, right? Like the expectation that we need to have results right now, otherwise we move on to the next thing, right? And I have a quote because I read this question so that you can also think of your quote already, Ivan. But I already read Guy Tocolor question before, and I wrote a quote for you. So deciding where you want to go is half of the work. The other half is giving consistent steps to get there. And I would say that consistency is essential for developing passion and a personal brand and a style and, you know, anything that makes you unique, because or almost everything. I think consistency is so essential, you know. It's like very important to do something consistently to reach your goals, right? So going from A to B requires work and requires consistent steps towards that goal, right? The question is always like how much you want that and how much you're willing to put work on that. So if you, Guy Tocolor, are trying a lot of different stuff right now and you don't give them time, or you don't put time or allocate time for one of them at least, it's gonna become really hard for you to become good at that, right? So what's your take on this, Ivan? How do you, continue doing what you do and, keep moving forward?
It's difficult because, what you have to do is focus on one thing, and probably is the thing that you're going to get more output from it. If you put too much energy on something and you don't get any benefits, it can be frustrating. So it doesn't have to be immediate. Okay, so yeah, you have to be constant and you have to have faith in what you do. But if finally it doesn't work because probably you don't have the talent, because effort is, of course, effort is something you have to put in things, but you need to have something inside you, let's call it talent, okay? If I don't have a better word, I'm not 100% sure that talent is the word, but I don't have a better one. So if you have to put a lot of effort, but I'm kind of making a mess of myself, but you need some talent as well. If you put both things, it will work. It will work. Sooner or later, it will work. But you have to focus on one thing. Because if you try to, in Spanish, there is an idiom, which is dar palos de ciego, to hit. It's like a blind man hitting things. If you go like that, trying to hit some different things without putting too much attention in any of them, it won't work. So focus on one thing, and it will work. And if it doesn't, move to another one, but one thing at a time.
Great. So I love that. We're gonna put this quote on the show notes later. We're gonna put it together and then add it to the show notes. So we're moving on to the second question from Cami. So how do you find work in the area you want to grow? So I guess Cami is asking how you can attract more of the work you want to do. So if she wants to do, or he wants to do more lettering work or more work in logotype design, whatever that is, how do you attract more of the work you want to have, right? Which relates to the concept of kind of personal brand and, artistic voice and all of the things that we've been discussing throughout the show. So I also put together a quote for you, Cami, and I will elaborate on that afterwards. The opportunities we attract mirror the message we give to the world. So that means that attracting the clients you want to have is primarily in your hands. And this is actually a good way of putting it, because it empowers you. It means that you are like the boss of your life and your opportunities, right? But first you need to start by yourself. You need to look at what makes you unique, which is not only the work you do, but also, Ivan is a perfect example of that. The way you speak, the way you communicate with people, the way your website looks like, and the way you dress, like everything you sort of is what connects with other people, right? Or other people connects not only with your work, but with you as a person as well, and as a creative. So first I would say that you should start by yourself and defining what is, what you want to do and what makes you unique. And once you can communicate that properly to the world, the opportunities that come to you will start mirror that, right? Which I feel, Ivan, that doesn't need to be static. My interests or the things I wanted to do 5 years ago are not the same that I want to do today, right? This is something fluid. This is something that moves and changes throughout time. But first you need to empower yourself to believe that you are, you own this, like you are in charge of like creating opportunities for yourself. And the message you give to the world brings you or connects you with the opportunities you are looking for, right? What would you say to Cami, Ivan, in this case?
To be honest, I don't exactly remember Cami's question, but
so how do you find your work, or how do you find work in the area you want to grow? Like, how do you attract the clients you want to attract, and do more of the work you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mix of the work you've done previously and the goals you put yourself. So I think that if you want to get more clients, I don't know, for example, in the wine industry, let's say a wine industry, you have to build yourself a portfolio on that. And it doesn't, at the very beginning, it doesn't really matter if it's a real work or not. It's just make yourself proficient with that. I mean, do real projects, even if they're not real. Do projects that are taken seriously and not just sitting with Procreate on your couch for one evening. So you have to make yourself a portfolio with the type of work you want to do. And then with that is your weapon to approach your potential clients. And that is the thing. I mean, you cannot expect to write someone to write to some creative agency or graphic design studio to sell you as a freelance artist, and you have nothing to show, or you have something to show that maybe it doesn't match what you want to do. For example, my good friend Uriol Miró, if you look at his portfolio, he only have one kind of work, which is very calligraphic oriented. And I know that he does other kind of work, but he doesn't include it in his portfolio because he wants to show what he wants to be asked for. And that's very wise. The image you give, it's what you will be asked to make because it will be what people expect from you. Be careful with that, because that can be dangerous as well. Because sometimes the phone rings. Okay, the phone doesn't ring anymore, but the phone rings and someone is asking me for some sort of work that I used to do 7 years ago. And maybe me as a person is not interested in doing that anymore, because it's like, hey, been there, done that, or why don't you ask me for something that takes me slightly out of my comfort zone? And at the end, it doesn't matter. It's what they need. So maybe they need that. So, okay, let's do that. But if you talk about what you want to do as a professional, start doing that already. Eventually, it will come as a professional project.
That's super good. That's so tangible also. Like, as an artist, your portfolio is a strong message, right? And it should match the kind of work you want to do. So we touch on so many things on the conversation. Like we touch about, leaving your comfort zone and if you need to leave your comfort zone or not. We spoke about finding your passion and whether finding your passion is about finding that somewhere else or actually looking inside you and what your interests are and doubling down on that. So also we spoke about, which will make another episode, we spoke about the importance of getting really good at your work and, through work, reaching a unique voice as an artist and unique personality as an artist, and how your interests and the things you like, the music you listen to are the place to look for differentiators. So this is your unique interests is what makes you different from everyone else out there in the market, right? And you said something that I think is really, really important as well, how putting together talent and skill and work, all of it needs to be in the mix to actually stand out in the crowd, right? There is no quick fix. There is no quick result here. It's about being consistent in following your interests and putting work into that. And eventually you will find your passion. You will find also a personal brand or a uniqueness to your work, right? Everything connects with each other, right? So we are moving now to the last section or segment of our show, which is called Better Now. And in this segment, we share something we are happy about or something that has changed our lives lately that might help our listeners as well. It could be something really, really important, really transcendental, or something really silly. Could be a book you read or a Netflix series, or could be something I don't know, you started meditating and then you want to, provide it to the audience that they can try it as well. So is there something that you're currently happy about or that has made you smile lately or has made your life better?
Absolutely, yeah. Recently I read a book. Let me find out the title in English because I have read it in Spanish.
Yeah.
It's a book by Michael Pollan.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
We're going to add this to the show notes later so that everyone can buy it or read it. It's funny. I'm also going to recommend the book. I actually mentioned that before. I'm going to recommend the book as well afterwards. Yeah, go.
Oh, the book is by an author called Michael Pollan. And the book is The Omnivore's Dilemma. And it's about where your food comes from. I mean, the thing is that for eating better, you have to be aware of where your food comes from. Mm-hmm. So it's a study of the food chain from the very beginning of the generating of the food till you get it in your table. So it's really, really interesting, and it's packed of incredible data you wouldn't believe, and it makes you think about what you eat. And yeah, reading that has been really eye-opener because it makes you think a lot and consider when you go to buy your groceries, it makes you consider what you buy and eat and not. So yeah, The Omnivore's Dilemma. Yeah. Okay,
great. We're gonna add this to the show notes, and I think can we connect that with what you mentioned before about looking for inspiration? Like that is like the things that feed our creativity, like inspiration, and how this book might connect as well with being aware of how you feed yourself.
thought about it, but it makes sense. I mean, everything is connected. I mean, there is not the Ivan Castro letter artist, and there is not the Ivan Castro book, and there is not the Ivan Castro father. I mean, it's all the same guy. So everything is connected. So yeah, maybe it makes sense.
Yeah, great. So I wanted to recommend this book that I mentioned already, that it's been out for a while, I believe, but it touches on the topic of finding your passion, or this understanding that you need to find your passion, and it's called "So Good They Can't Ignore You" by Cal Newport. I guess you pronounce it Newport. He really outlines the step that you can use to help you find your passion or develop a passion. And I resonated a lot with the things he said in that book because, through my story, like finding, through my path with lettering and trying to get better at it and stuff, there's a lot of steps that he outlines there that I really resonated with. So I would totally recommend that to you if you're looking for your passion. This is something that will bring a lot of light on this topic, right? So it was, sorry.
Yeah, about the book I recommended, I mean, it's a 500 pages book. So if someone is kind of intimidated for it, Michael Pollan has also a show on Netflix, a 4-chapter miniseries, which is called Cooked, and is way more affordable time-wise than the book. So yeah, it's a good way to start thinking about what you eat.
Great. We're going to add this to the show notes as well. So it was such an honor to have you, Ivan. Where can people find you, Leslie?
Yeah, well, you have my website, which is ivancastro.es. And you can find me on Instagram. The website is kind of the last time I updated it. It was like 3 years ago, maybe. So yeah, but there is a big part of my portfolio and other things. And yeah, my Instagram is something daily fed. I'm Ivan Castro Lettering on Instagram. And yeah, basically that's it. And you have my books as well.
Sure.
The ABC of custom lettering that you already talked about. And there is another book that was published last year, which is Lettering to the Max. That is more affordable for beginners because it explains the same concepts as the ABC, but in a more affordable way. Yeah.
Amazing. We're going to add this to the show notes as well. You can find me, the host of this show, on social networks as well, at Martina Flor on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. If you have a question or comments, go to martinaflor.com/podcast, where you can see previous episodes, find show notes, and send voice memos with your comments and questions. You can comment on the things we spoke about in this episode, and we will play them in future episodes. So you can, if there's a thought or something you want to say about what we discussed in this episode, just send it as a voice memo and we will play it on the next episode. You can also find this episode and comment on my YouTube channel. So if you go to martinaflor.com/YouTube, and you can also listen to this podcast on your favorite podcast app. This is it for today. If you love this episode, of course, subscribe to this podcast. And if you leave us a review, it will help other peers find it. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Ivan, for being there, and see you in the next. Amazing. Thank you so much for being there, and see you on the next episode of Letter Now.